Hello again, everyone. Edwin Learnard back once again. In this YouTube astrological segment, I'm going to be talking about astrology and the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. Now, I wanted to talk about some natal placements he has and some transits that occurred on the day of the assassination, and said how these may have manifest how I should say I'm sorry how these may have played a role in his assassination. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is just his basic character, the Sun, Moon, and Ascendant. The Sun, Moon, and Ascendant, of course, the three main proponents in one's horoscope. He had the Sun in Capricorn, Moon in Pisces, and a Taurus Ascendant. Sun in Capricorn, of course, the basic ones can be tied in with one's ambitions, the career, and Sun in Capricorn basic ones can also be connected with status and reputation. The thing, though, is I don't think he was really about doing things for that sole reason for getting the recognition, but I think he wanted to really just help others in the blacks getting their rights and trying to do what he could to eradicate racism. And he was obviously very prominent in civil rights. But talking about, again, going back to the Capricorn Sun, you could say the basic one, getting down to business, doing and then having the Moon in Pisces, doing so with a lot of altruism, self-sacrificing energy, and also he made it his business, you could say, trying to help those that were less fortunate than himself, those that were, you could say, that were victims. I mean, Pisces is the sign associated with victims, and it could be through persecution or ostracism. In this case, people that had animosity toward them and were discriminated due to their race, and also through idealism. A lot of that the Capricorn energy, that disciplined, structured, consistent energy, going into matters with the Moon in Pisces toward focus on a dream, on ideals. I mean, he had that, remember that famous I have a dream speech. Pisces is the sign associated with dreams, what may be surreal, what one can really idealize. And he was obviously somebody that had that dream of something that, and being idealistic in the process. And also having a Taurus Ascendant. Of course, the Taurus Ascendant is what flavors the Sun and Moon energy. This energy being done with a lot of Taurian persistence, calmness, perseverance, patience, and very strong powers of concentration. And he was somebody that really embodied peace. So the rising sign or ascendant, of course, is associated with our mask, our facade, the side that we, the energy, the characteristics and qualities that we readily project to others, and the side that is most readily expressed. And he, of course, expressed a very calm and placid front. He wanted to fight the racism and bigotry, doing so in a rather peaceful manner. Moon in Pisces and Taurus Ascendant, it's a combination that is very passive, very peaceful. But he did, but Taurus Ascendant can also, of course, be very strong-willed and have a lot of, again, going back to the powers of persistence and perseverance, and not willing to give in to his fight for this equality for races. Now, as far as the transits, and I want to go also talk, well, there's something else I want to talk about. The fact he had Mercury in Aquarius I thought was interesting. It tells me that his mind was likely very motivated toward being progressive, that he had a lot of progressive ideas, maybe even innovative ones, and also matters connected with civil rights. Aquarius can be associated with civil rights activism. This is and also being in the 10th house. This is something he gained, of course, a lot of status, recognition, and notoriety for. Now, going to some natal placements I'm looking at that may have first natal places might have tied in to this. Now, his assassination. Well, one thing that I saw is that he does have, in as far as a natal placement, he has Mars in Gemini. When he was shot, he had the bullet had gone through his cheek and the lower jaw, and also a shoulder. Gemini rules the shoulders. Mars can be associated with gunfire and physical injuries. Now, he also has Chiron conjunct Jupiter in Taurus in the 12th house of hospitalization and endings. The lower jaw rules Taurus. Chiron in Taurus by itself can sometimes manifest in physical injuries that are Taurus related, which can include the lower jaw. Jupiter, as I've spoken about in previous videos, can be rather paradoxical. It could be very strongly benign and benevolent, but it could also have a tendency to enlarge and expand. Jupiter conjunct Chiron can expand wounds when it's conjunct Chiron. Now, transit Mars was also close to his natal Chiron at the time, which could emphasize wounds that are associated with gunfire, something of a volatile nature, and being in Taurus, again, something with the lower jaw is associated with the zodiac sign Taurus. The fact that transit Mars was in his 12th house at the time made, of course, I would say made this shooting more difficult for him to see. In his natal chart, he has Pluto making an opposition to his Sun. The Sun rules either the left or the right eye, depending on gender. And when you have, the way I perceive it, when you have like Pluto opposing your Sun, Pluto is the planet that is associated with death. It might be harder to see death coming if you have Pluto making an adverse aspect to your Sun, and perhaps the opposition, I would say opposition or square in conjunct as well. I see any of those aspects can make that, I would say, make that more difficult. And the thing about it too is that also Pluto is one of the rulers of his 7th house, and the 7th house does correspond with open adversaries. So maybe it made it difficult for him to actually see and be able to focus on who his open adversaries actually were. And the thing about it is he was obviously, with this, Moon in Pisces, very compassionate person about altruism, trying to, at least on a subconscious level, trying to accept the good in others, and trying not to see anything overly adverse or negative regarding people. Now, I think too, when I look at his chart as well, another thing that I'm seeing is that at this time, transit Chiron was actually very close to his 12th house cusp of endings. Transit Chiron had recently transitioned from Pisces into Aries. Chiron was at a critical degree at the time, 0 degrees in the volatile sign of Aries, and Aries is the sign associated with gunfire because it is ruled by Mars. Transit Chiron was also not far from his natal Uranus at the time. Natal Uranus is connected, I would say, with civil rights and activism, given that Uranus does rule Aquarius. This shooting, I don't know enough about the intentions of the shooter, but it wouldn't surprise me if this had something to do with the civil rights that Martin Luther King Jr. was involved in, and the movement that he was constantly, persistently trying to get improved or what have you. And something where when you're looking at this energy as well, he also had total, including Mars, he had four major astrological, you could say there were three planets. There are actually three planets that had transited his 12th house at the time, and the North Node as well. And the 12th house is a house of endings. Now, in his, when I look at his, looking at his natal chart, another thing is the ruler of his 8th house is falls in the 12th house of hospitalization, but the 12th house can also be the house, I would say, of obscurity, of things that are unclear, nebulous. And I think with the fact that the ruler of the 8th house, he has Sagittarius on the cusp of the 8th house, the ruler falls in the 12th house. It tells me that there's still going to be likely some things regarding his murder, his death, that we may never know as far as the reasoning behind, really the full reasoning behind why this actually took place. And the fact that the ruler also conjuncts Chiron. It's another indicator of this murder being associated, of his death being associated with physical, something of a physical nature, physical wounds. Hold on a moment, people. Sorry about that, I'm back. But anyway, well, another thing I wanted to state too is that when he had, when this assassination occurred, is that transit Neptune was also conjunct his natal south node. When you have the planet, and when you're talking about the south node, when it's involved in a transit, it could reflect and manifest an energy we could be going away from. The fact that you're talking about Neptune being associated with dreams, sadly this could have manifested in him going away from a dream. The fact it's in Scorpio, Scorpio is the sign associated with death, putting an ending, not literal death, but putting an ending maybe to being in the 7th house of open adversaries, the people that he saw as the open enemy, as people that were racist, that were about bigotry, that had animosity toward blacks due to their color. It tells me, sadly, when his passing signified that his dream for himself was sadly coming to an end in his passing, sadly. But another thing, too, really not much more had to get into as far as his his assassination and natal placements and transits that might be connected with it. Well, he did have Pluto in the 3rd house in his natal chart. And Pluto is the sign associated with not just death but surgery. He had Pluto in the zodiac sign Cancer. He had surgery on his chest. The zodiac sign Cancer does rule the chest. Pluto can be associated with surgery. Being in the 3rd house, this happened at a place where he, I would say, presumably was involved in a short journey in his own country. And anyway, people, just really just trying to see if there's anything else I could see as far as any natal placements or transit tied into the assassination. Well, another thing I'm seeing is that transit Sun in Aries was in his 12th house. The Sun can be about life in astrology. When you have a transit like this, and transit Sun being about life, hitting the 12th house, a lot of cases this just simply can indicate diminished or depleted energy and vitality. But when you have other indicators in your chart, this is something that sometimes can correspond with the end of life. You're talking about the planet associated with life and vitality being in the 12th house of limitations and restrictions. At the time of his assassination, another thing I want to get at is actually a progression that was interesting. He had his progressed Sun in Pisces, making a conjunction to is part of Arabic part of assassination, and people don't think that Arabic parts in astrology are insignificant. They don't have, or if they don't think they don't have any importance or significance in a horoscope, they can. The progressed sun in Pisces was conjunct his Arabic part of assassination at the time he was murdered. And being in Pisces, not a surprise, this was something associated, I would say, with his ideal, with a dream that he had. And being in the 11th house, it's also in the house of hopes and wishes. And he was, perhaps he was assassinated due to a group that he was with, or organization, because the 11th house is associated with that. And the 11th house, the fact that it corresponds with the zodiac sign Aquarius, I would say the 11th house is also associated with activism and civil rights. And being in, the sun being progressed in Pisces, doing something which was associated with a dream for this, an ideal, and doing so with a lot of altruistic and compassionate energy. And anyway, people, that'll conclude this YouTube astrological segment. Until next time, people, Edwin Learnard saying stay well.